Okay, great. So we are now recording. So welcome again. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am thrilled to introduce you to today's event with Elizabeth Kirschner reading from Because the Sky is 1,000 Soft Hurts, which released June 1st. Verena Mahlow reading from Island of Dead Gods, released on July 20th. And Karen M. Wicks reading from Twisted Silver Spoons, which released on the 10th of August. All three of these titles can be purchased through your local bookstores and online via IndieBound, Book Depository, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. And of course, the books can be ordered on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chat. The reading will conclude with time for your questions. So at that time, if you have a question for our authors, go ahead and type it in the chat and we'll make sure it gets asked. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Elizabeth, Verena, and Karen. You are in for a treat tonight. We at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we'd love to read it. Feel free to submit your work at books@atmospherepress.com. As you may have experienced over the last year of virtual events, technical issues can happen. If they do, we'll do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. Thank you in advance for your patience. During the reading, please keep yourselves muted to keep extraneous sound at a minimum. After all of our readers have read, I'll ask us all to unmute so we can cheer and clap for our authors. In the meantime, please do feel free to use the chat for praise and yays and comments. So let's get to it. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our first reader, Elizabeth Kirschner. Elizabeth Kirschner is a writer and master gardener. She's published 6 collections of poetry, most notably My Life as a Doll, and an award-winning memoir, Waking the Bones. Because the Sky is 1,000 Soft Hurts is her debut collection of short stories. She lives in Maine. Without further delay, I give you Elizabeth Kirschner. Elizabeth, the virtual podium is yours. Oh, I think, Elizabeth, it sounds like you might be muted.
Is that better?
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Okay. So this is the actual book, Because the Sky is 1,000 Soft Hurts, which was beautifully done by Atmosphere Press. And I actually own the cover art because it was what helped me complete the book. So I'm going to read from one short story, and the title of it is A Sorry Scheme of Things. Who am I when at 17 I'm tunnel vision drunk, and only the stars, and only the sea, and only the light gush from its unknown source? This can be charted as precisely as a fever, even though it's absolutely colorless and missing a thingness. Swerving in my father's station wagon at 3 a.m., 2-lane road, all curves and dips, dark woods, a stream, a patchy acre of burrs and grass. I don't see the deer until it turns its head. Road full of eyeballs, small moons glowing. I crank the wheel, stamp both feet on the brake, skid, jolt into a ditch. Glitter and crunch of broken glass in my lap, deer hair drifting like dust. My chin and shirt are soaked, one eye half obscured by the cocked bridge of broken glasses on my nose. With the car still running, its lights angle up at the trees as I get out. The doe lies on its side. I want to fix the beautiful body, the color of wet straw, of oak leaves in winter. But here's what I do. I pick up the deer like a bride, wrestle it into the back of the car. the seat folded down. Somehow I steer the car out of the ditch and head home, night rushing in through the broken window, headlight dangling, side mirror gone. My head throbs, something stabs at my side. The deer breathes behind me, shallow, fast. At a stoplight, I'm almost home when the doe scrambles, its long head like a ghost in the rearview mirror. It bites me, teeth clamping down on my shoulder. I scream, struggle, and flail until the deer, exhausted, lets go and lies down. I wonder how my own body, empty, clean of secrets, knows how to drag the deer out of the car onto the driveway. Shaking, I pat it down, frisk it like a fish slipped out of its net. The deer shudders, bleats. By now, the doe's eyes are hot tar and my shirt's smelly as dirt. Clutching the doe, I slap it, scream, say it doesn't matter. Say, this is enough. Say, you want this. Around the driveway, the trees wave like mute women trying to alert me to an emergency. Roots jump like jump ropes, grass cut like a cancer. My father's comes out yelling, what the hell? The odor has changed enormous as a storm as he walks to the tool shed, comes back lugging a concrete block. When he drops it on the deer's head, I'm a river diverted from its path. And when God doesn't strike and the sea doesn't overflow, and my voice is a kettle of hawks circling, I see how death accepts a special kind of silence and exhales. While I unpin from my skin, we dump the doe in the woods as though we were gangsters. Her mouth grows more exposed, her spine a column of clouds, the remains a brutal cave. After rucking dirt onto her, I go into the house. All night I had danced in a bar full of misfits, squash flowers rotting in my hair. Drunk, weaving, I broke open a pecan full of beige meat. Smelling of dried sassafras, nutmeg, burnt flour, and clamshells, it was as though I held something monstrous, a two-faced daughter in my own arms. Shuffling in place, I danced with a man with bits of blue pigment on his teeth, the color of Mary's cloak. The floorboards wilted while he twirled, dipped me as if into a vat of hot wax. The twirling, it lacked etiquette and felt like being pulled into a deep end. Heavy as a worn saddle, I wanted to drink from this man's sorry scheme of things, touch the spot that bites back, and so I did. Like him, I had a wide, friendly face, yet when I smelled his dishpan breath, I swung my ponytail, a filthy tassel. As we walked out the door, his voice, like pestilence, burrowed in my ears. We're mired in this until we're not. Next thing I knew, blood on the sullen ground, blood on the stones, blood on the slope, and blood on the fist gorging into me without pain. Blood in thick amber strokes, blood from my right ear, from his ochre nose. Whose blood was this? On my fender, in my shoe, in his breath. There's blood, he said. Blood here too, I said, down here. Only blood, blood on his watch, would it dry? On his whitish wedding band, would it dry? Blood on his knee, blood on the faithful knee, the one readied for erotic negation. Blood at the age of 17, blood that was mute and autistic and cauterized and smelled of tar. Was this mine? Blood on the wheel, bronze, dead, gold, and diamond deep. Blood as fast as the car when I hit the deer. The thud was log thick. When I got out, her hide was frayed mohair, her petite feet small as the ace of clubs. Dragging her into the woods with my father, then standing in front of her body, listening to her bones hiss like pumice stones. I wanted to drown my hands, for this is the work of daughters, to hold the dead inside them, then turn each sliver about the tongue, the shape in a tangram. My father's voice cracked, was candy in my brain. You, he said, while boring his knuckles into my eyes until they were ringed with purple, like reversed lily pads. Also violet, my tears, alien as a teenager's. Even now, a year or so later, my right eyebrow still bends wrong, a warped arrow. I glance at it in the rear view as I drive back home, thinking it's a terrible time to be alive when all I can see is the skull's mush, like lemons squeezed into a pot of tea. I go back into the woods where the deer was left, like an underwater statue. The woodsy rooms abstract. How can I stop dreaming about her? She whose hot package of breath rose up like a rocket and falls again, also like a rocket. What I make of the earth is inferred, and the undersides of the leaves on the forest floor are a rundown palace, the color eel black. This is when I suspect I'll never get to see it. A bright future, never coming close. My hands, these smell as smelt as I stand a condemned building, while the hour half steps its crippled way elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next in our lineup is Verena Mahlow, whose novel Island of Dead Gods celebrated its book birthday on July 20th. Verena Mahlow loves traveling, languages, reading, and writing. She graduated with an MA and PhD in German, American, and Italian studies, and wrote a large number of scripts for TV movies. Besides many articles, essays, and short stories, her first novel was published and awarded first prize of a literary competition for female writers in Germany. Since 2011, she has been living on both sides of the Big Pond, in Mainz on the Rhine and in Dallas, Texas. Island of Dead Gods is her first novel published in the English language. Verena, take it away.
Okay, this is my book, Island of Dead Gods, and I start. Pardon my accent. Island of Dead Gods, Villa Escorpión, Ibiza, March 9th, 2019. It is not true that trouble shared is trouble halved. Your pain will always be yours alone, whether it hurt only you or 3 others or millions. And it doesn't matter if you try to resist or learn to live with it, or if you were courageous or a coward. Coward was the last word Amanda thought when the cyanide traveling to her insides on a gulp of French champagne started a fire. First it burned her tongue, her gullet, and when the poison hit her gastric acids, things really got wild. Membrane, tissue, nerve fibers, muscles were slashed like paper in a shredder, flinging her body in crazy spasms. The pain seemed to last forever. It only died down when seagulls announced the new day Amanda would no longer have to face. Rosenda, the housekeeper, discovered her employer in one of the lounge chairs at the swimming pools. The first thing she noticed was Amanda's smooth, rosy complexion. Rosenda frowned. So she's done it too, instead of growing old the way Mother Nature intended. Isn't this supposed to be a woman's world now? Does she really think this can be a solution to the problem, to him? What Rosenda did not know was that Amanda's rejuvenated face only reflected the oxygenating effect of the cyanide. When after multiple repetitions of "good morning, man," the closed eyes still wouldn't open, it dawned on Rosenda that no plastic surgeon had worked here, but Moss, the god of death. Last trip to Ibiza, chapter 1. Departure had been delayed to almost midnight. For the umpteenth time, the ferry's loudspeakers emitted the old resistance song in last year's summer hit, Bella Ciao. Feline, or Phil as she preferred to be called, hummed along. One morning I woke up and there was the invader. But after a while, the words felt like punches. When the engines finally fired up and drowned out the music, people cheered as if they hadn't counted on departure anymore. From the upper deck, Phil watched the ritual of Spanish farewells. Passengers throwing rolls of toilet paper at the people below on the dock. Some paper dropped into the water, but most spent between the hands of the people on board and those on the dock like a metaphorical bond. It blew in the wind, unrolled, stretched, still connected. Only when the ship left the harbor did it tear apart. For a moment, Phil wished she also had such a piece of paper in her hand, but then she thought, why? It was toilet paper, silly symbolism. Her connection had already torn, she should accept it. She did accept it, and she would manage on her own. In the dormitory cabin, the only empty seat Phil could find was in a row of 3. At the window lounged a blonde woman in a black leather coat with a profile like Charlize Theron. She focused on her smartphone, an intense expression on her heavily made up face. An elderly lady sat towards the aisle reading a pulp novel. When Phil climbed across her, she accidentally pushed the book out of the hand of the lady, who reacted with a remarkable expletive. Ay, hostia puta. Sorry, Phil fished for the book and was rewarded with such a mischievous grin she felt like giving the woman a hug. But she only smiled back. Lo siento, senora, slipped off her boots, rolled her green sweater into a pillow and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Phil's first thought was she should have paid for a plane ticket. As if a few more deaths would have made much difference now. She often had sleeping problems, but this night in the dormitory cabin had been like sleep deprivation torture. The air below deck had intensified to near suffocation. Passengers competed in a snoring match, especially the elderly lady at first sight, and her butaka proved to be the most unergonomic sleeping chair on earth. But now, golden morning light fell through the portholes, and on the horizon, Ibiza appeared, La Isla Blanca. Phil's tiredness was replaced by giddy anticipation, as always when she got close to her favorite island. The approaching coastline, the sandy beaches, the gentle hills over jagged cliffs, the hotels and mansions jostled with modest farmhouses for the best sites by the sea. She loved it. As she left her house, a charming old finca, 3 whitewashed stone squares that made 2 bedrooms in a sala with a kitchen, an unreliable shower, and a roof leaking in 2 spots when the rain fell and the island winds howled. A house full of imperfections, but gentle like a rugged old friend. It used to belong to Phil's great aunt Charlotte, who in the 70s dropped out of her affluent German existence to become a hippie and live in accordance with nature. Charlotte spent the rest of her life on the island she called Magic. When she died at 97, Phil could hardly believe she was the lucky one to inherit the finca. Phil's excitement was replaced by a heavy heart, but she'd better not dwell on the past. Instead, she would have to act now and everything would change. She would lose her beloved finca, the home she had dreamt about moving to full time. Now she never would, because she was broke, bankrupt, alone. She had 12 days to solve the problem. Now I jump a bit and go to chapter 3 to stay with Phil. In the ferry's cafeteria, TVs were flickering in every corner. Phil ordered a coffee and sat down by the big panorama window. Someone asked, May I? Without waiting for an answer, the blonde woman who had slept next to Phil placed a steaming cup on her table. She dropped in a chair and took a hearty bite from a croissant. Her unbuttoned leather coat revealed a camouflage t-shirt showing her cleavage. She sipped her coffee. Black strong doesn't get better. Phil flashed her a smile. That's true. Check. The blonde held up one hand for high five. I'm Tamar Stettin. Fleeing man, Phil. Half-heartedly, Phil tapped against the palm. Hi, Tamar. Tamar, Old Testament. The woman giggled and started chatting as if Phil were an old friend. She was coming from Frankfurt after dumping her boyfriend, who, she said, had hung on her like a damn leash, suffocating. She needed her freedom and couldn't wait to be back on Ibiza, her home. And you, vacationing? You're damn early. Phil made a face. I wish. She explained that she was coming to sell her house. As she needed the money badly, she added, infected by Tamar's frankness. What happened? Oh, family shit. She wouldn't go so far to reveal her drama to a stranger. Bloody hell, I know. Fucked up finances can surely spoil a girl's mood. True again. Phil was rewarded with a wide grin. So find someone to marry and let him take care of it. That's the plan. Know someone? Tall, dark, handsome, tons of money? Well, let me think. I could. Tamar obviously didn't get sarcasm. Forget it. I'd rather sell a kidney or, for now, my house. Right. You'll work it out just fine. Just get the max out of it. That's what I hope. And you can. Tamar leaned close to Phil. Because today is your lucky day, believe it or not. Rather not. You should, because you met me. Okay. What you need is someone you can trust, who gets the best deal for you. And I know exactly the one. Before Phil could react, Tamar had pulled out her phone and was already speaking. Hey, back in the fast lane, that's the right attitude. Yeah, listen, I've got someone for you. Moments later, Phil had an 11 a.m. appointment with an agent called Jörg Schürer, Mr. Big Shot in real estate, as Tamar boasted, on Ibiza, on all of the Balearic Islands. Phil typed the address of TAB Real Estate in a Villa Escorpion into her phone. Thanks so much. Awkwardly, she crossed both arms in front of her, a little overwhelmed, but she should be grateful for Tamar's helpfulness. Mr. Schürer might spare her a lot of running around looking for a competent realtor on her own. The countdown was ticking. You can trust Schürer, he is the best. Tamar spoke as if she could read Phil's mind. A grease appeared between her eyes, even so life is not all too easy for him these days. She gently massaged the grease away and echoed film, family shit. But what can I say? She grinned in her previous unconcerned way. Hell is empty and all the devils are here. Shakespeare. Shakespeare? Literary quotes were about the last thing Phil would have expected to run across his painted lips. Proved one should not be prejudiced. Tamar finished her coffee and pulled out a card. Here, dear. Call if you need anything else. I know everything and everyone on Ibiza. Phil started to thank her again, but suddenly Tamar's attention was distracted. She stared at a TV screen where the Telenoticias Matinales had begun. The morning's big news was about someone called Kai Maurer, who had been flying from the Spanish mainland to Ibiza when his single-engine aircraft went into a spin above Cespalmador, just north of the Ibizan coast. It rushed the tiny island's watchtower and crashed into the sea, killing the man. No loss for humanity, the scumbag. Phil heard Tamar mutter. You know him? I told you I know everyone on Ibiza. Tamar's face suddenly bore a first expression. This was Maurer, the Alpha Insurance jerk. Oh, right. Alpha Insurance, Phil knew, had been involved in a public scandal about their executives' incentive trips to an Italian brothel. Kai Maurer had organized these trips and was caught trying to tax deduct them. As one of the legal interpreters, Phil had been sworn in at the court hearings to translate the testimonies of two underage prostitutes. a job she didn't like to remember. As Maurer got away with a ridiculously low fine, it also had been Phil's last job as legal interpreter before she lost her license. Bankrupt people didn't qualify for this task. That's it for now.
Thank you, Verena.
Welcome.
Last and certainly not least is Karen M. Wicks. Karen M. Wicks holds a doctorate from New York University and has taught in middle and high school and at the college level. She has served as director for curriculum and instructional development at the College Board. She and her husband Les co-founded a supplemental education company and the K-12 public school, Royal Live Oaks Academy of the Arts and Sciences Charter School in South Carolina, where Karen has been the executive director / CEO since 2012. Twisted Silver Spoons is her debut novel. Karen, the virtual podium is yours.
Well, I'm going to start at the very beginning, and then if it's not too much time, I'll do a little bit more. Part 1. But love has pitched her mansion in the place of excrement, for nothing can be soul or whole that has not been rent. W.B. Yeats. Prologue, 1985. Yes, I'm just feeling a little hemmed in, I guess, a passing fantasy. The silver spoon lodged in George's throat was choking the life out of him. She beckoned across the dunes towards the spangled house, still filled with Fritz and Belinda's guests. Yes, I see what you mean. Her eyes peeled back his ambivalence. Chapter 1, 1986. Daggers of Caribbean sunlight pried open George's eyes as a continent of stifling duty constricted his view. He arose, unsteady, his patrician mouth curled around the scum of filial duty. An approaching shadow rescued him. Mr. Leibniz, may I offer you some refreshment? No, thank you. I am meeting Father for lunch shortly. Very good, sir. George watched the steward retreat down the teak stairs. His eyes moistened with inevitability. 10 days in the Grenadines on his father Fritz's 190-foot feed ship yacht Alexandra had held such promise. No loathsome stepmother and step-siblings. But Fritz's frequent disparaging remarks threaded rancor through George's shock of black hair. How ironic that the motor yacht had been named for his grandmama when it was one of Fritz's seats of power. He lumbered down 2 steps to the lavatory. Fritz wouldn't fail to notice a hair out of place. The placid demeanor and bold aquamarine eyes staring out from the antique beveled mirror masked his angst. He fingered the well-worn Cartier watch grandmama had given him for his 14th birthday, each compulsive stroke attacking his dread. Jerking his head toward the open door, he tightened the knots in his stomach and launched toward the dining room. 12:33. Striding through the salon, he straightened to his full 6'4" height, poised to tower over his father, but with each step, he shrank a few inches under the uniform of obsequiousness. Even seated, Fritz's tall, muscular frame, the jut of his square chin, and his penetrating electric blue eyes commanded obedience. If only they had sailed on the Morgan, where his youth would have given him the advantage. Each step prickled sweat on his neck. Fritz would needle him about graduating from New York University School of Law a year late. Preparation for the New York bar would be a perfunctory requirement, and recriminations that he had not gone to Yale Law School, along with new expectations, would be served for lunch. The intrusion of the fond memory of his childhood father withered in the tight bud of his heart. Good afternoon, Mr. Leibniz. George's skin quivered, his head turned. Bruce, are you all right, sir? Tell father I'll be along directly, he snapped. Very good, sir. As the steward moved off, George bit the inside of his cheek, and the metallic taste of blood propelled him back to his grandfather Rainer's death and Fritz's quick rise to power over his brother Gunther. George had been sent off to Philip's Exeter Academy, and in time his mother, an exquisite doll who had lost her sheen, had been replaced. He scurried into the nearby lavatory to collect himself. The face of a child lost in memories accosted him in the gilded mirror. Clenching his jaw, he embraced his 24 years and wheeled toward the dining room. As he shortened the remaining expanse, a scowling Fritz tapped his Rolex. His steeled gaze refused the expected apology, and Fritz's face morphed into a smile. Have a nice nap, did we? The stone crabs and the salade frisée looked delectable. I have ordered you a glass of Chardonnay and a nice coffee for our meeting afterwards. George sat down, pique tightening his shoulders. Papa, he began in French, as the waitstaff began serving them. J'ai des questions. Je voudrais savoir si old papa. Fritz raised his eyebrows. Your grandfather? I have questions about his death. Fritz's eyes sharpened as he dangled a crab in midair. Marcus said something sinister happened. Your cousin? A smirk crossed Fritz's face. Tearing into the crustacean, he deposited the shell onto an empty plate and patted his mouth with a linen napkin. Old Papa's death was his own doing. I was preoccupied with securing the foreign divisions. The strain of our conversation must have affected him, but you must understand, he used every weapon at his disposal to wound me. George sipped his wine. He seduced the first girl I loved when I was 17 to prove he was the better man. The golden liquid scalded his throat. Bitterness flickered across Fritz's face, darkening his jowls. It gives one a sense of the lengths to which your grandfather would go to keep his family in line, n'est-ce pas? George's tongue congealed. Arrogant fool, not a scintilla of humility. If it had not been for Alexander, Rainer would have been some mid-level functionary in the bowels of Austrian bureaucracy. Grandmama, what do you mean? I know Grandmama and great-uncle Sergei fled Russia, but you remember so little, while your cousin makes a point to know everyone's affairs. George lined up his knife and spoon. Alexandra's fortune started Leibniz Enterprises. Rainer was a mere engineer with a modest inheritance. She had the means and the intellect to, I thought, she was the visionary, and as LE became successful, Rainer grew to resent her. Contempt etched his face. He tried to limit her influence. By the time I was 15, he particularly detested me, her favorite son. He pursed his lips as he looked out across the expanse of ocean. Fortunately, your grandmother was shrewd enough to insist on maintaining majority ownership. She shipped me off to Paris to Uncle Sergei. You're saying Grandmama favored you? He stared at his son. Your supercilious grandfather believed she favored me to justify his jealousy. I was capable of succeeding him, not dear brother Gunther, and he pitted us against each other. Such hubris. He waved his hand in disgust. George's lip quivered. He actually, absolument. A steward approached. He would have succeeded if Alexandra had not steered Gunther and me into the roles for which we were born. George's eyes brightened. Is that why Uncle Gunther leads the engineering and manufacturing divisions and you are the CEO? Bien sûr, George. You can thank your grandmother and Uncle Sergei for the cordial relationship between Gunther and me, and for Ellie's success. Fritz sipped his wine and picked up his fork. I thought you took the chairmanship away from Uncle Gunther. Fritz exhaled a sinister laugh. Marcus feeding you misinformation? George blinked and arranged his food by color. Do not be so gullible. Papa hated me because Mummy was preparing me to succeed him. She was guiding Gunther, of course, a rather blunt instrument, but he came along. George raised his eyebrows. Fritz scattered the leaves of the lettuces to the edge of the plate. Papa marginalized my role in the company. He may have succeeded if he had not died. A wistful look crossed his eyes. I loved him, you know. His face hardened. And I despised him. Nothing can erase what he did, especially to Mummy. George's back straightened. What do you mean? Uncle Sergei discovered another well-cared-for family in London, a wife and daughter. George's fork thudded against his plate. Fritz's voice bristled, and a long string of mistresses. In his will, Rayner provided generously for all of them. I had every reason to wish Papa dead. However, a brain hemorrhage killed him. George leaned forward. I was leaving the room when I heard a noise at the door, and of course you know the rest. George nodded. How could I forget? You tumbled into me as you left. His eyes sharpened. Was he breathing when you returned to the study? Fritz's eyes darkened. No. George contemplated the irony of the father Fritz described with such bitterness to the father he had become. As he sipped his Chardonnay, the wine swirled with the past. And from chapter 7. George slowed his steps upon entering his grandmother's Wilton study and stepped down into her spacious sitting room. The Chanel-clad grande dame was dismissing her personal assistant. While he waited for Marthe to leave, he reflected on the many occasions grandmama had invited him into her private suite. He remembered one of the first times he had come when he was maybe 4 or 5 years old. Florida had brought him at his request. He blushed, remembering it was only a bloody knee from falling on the wooden barn floor. It seemed so silly now that he had needed her to hold him, take off the bandage, and kiss it. At first, he had been frightened. The room had seemed cavernous, but she made it cozy and bathed him with love. He felt a pinch of guilt about what he needed now. She beamed as she rose to greet him. Liebchen, come, give your old grandmama a kiss. He rushed to embrace her. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a? You seem troubled. I just had some questions about taking my place at LE. Was fragst du, Liebchen? His eyes looked down. I just want you to be proud of me. You know, I want to refine my artistic talents, she continued in German. Excelling in one's talents is important, but we have obligations to others who depend on us. As she peered into his eyes, he flinched. But I am not, you do not think you are ready? Come, sit with me. She led him to an overstuffed toile couch, guided him to a seat next to her, and squeezed his hand. I'm not sure I want, you would prefer Marcus take Fritz's place someday? His heart wilted. I'm not sure I want to lead Ellie. His eyes pleaded. Her eyes embraced him. Ah, you are caught between what is comfortable and what is your destiny. The bluntness of her statement punctured his armor. Is it that then, my destiny? Her mouth hardened. I could tell you what you want to hear. I could kiss you and make you feel better and send you on your way to play at art or philanthropy or whatever momentary fancy. I cannot let you do what you will one day regret. That would be irresponsible. His frown deepened. But what if I want to sell my paintings, become a maestro, support the poor? You can always have the finest maestros at your beck and call. Hobbies can be very rewarding, and philanthropy is not a profession. Rather, it is part of who we are. The choice is yours. The well of her eyes filled. Her voice became a whisper. Yet it is not. No more than it was for me when I had to choose between what I wanted, needed even, and what was required. Sadness clouded her eyes. I have had to make hard decisions. Some I hope you never have to make. He flinched. I had to choose to take a man's life to save my brother's. He gasped. Her eyes hardened. I had to choose to put my faith in a faithless husband. He focused on her eyes. I had to choose to fight for my sons. They deserve the opportunity to discover the areas in which they are best suited and not work against each other. She pursed her lips. I have kept secrets for the greater good. I had to choose who will best lead Ellie into the next century, a person of integrity and humility, full of heart, passion, sensitivity, one who doubts who he is capable of becoming. His face flushed. She patted his hand. I do not suggest the path will be easy, but you must be true to who you are. You are a Leibniz. You are meant to lead. So much has been invested in you. I would do you no favors to allow you to continue to enjoy what you cannot yet produce or keep on your own. Where much is given, much is required, yes? He nodded in resignation. She smiled. After you have been mentored and have given your best for 5 years, if you still wish to pursue other ventures, then so be it. But not now. In fairness to you, you have no foundation on which to stand in the world. She moved her fingers as if sifting through sand. He squirmed. Her jaw stiffened. I will not allow you to become a dilettante. His lips quivered. She patted his hand. You do not really know what you want. That is good and that is bad. Her hands moved upward, then down. Fortunately, you are a sponge. I remember at 7 and 8 how precocious you were. Do you recall when I selected books to test your reading ability? He smiled. Notre Dame de Paris, among others, challenged me. She patted his arm. But you were up to it. Now you must move to the next plateau. You are no longer a child. You will find your purpose at Ellie and use your talents to anticipate and fill needs. This is what we do. Successfully, I might add. Fritz took a big risk by diversifying. Some failures, more successes. New areas are emerging every day. Resource recovery, consumer electronics, mobile communications, technological innovations in numerous nascent fields. You have much to contribute to Ellie. Her steely eyes pinned him. Shame burned his cheeks. Let me be plain regarding Marcus. Unlike you, he has never responded to my attempts to mentor him. I have not played favorites, despite what he thinks. I saw what you both were capable of becoming when you were youngsters. I saw who was developing a strong character that would make me proud. You have proven your worth. Your cousin, however, gives me pause. He does not understand what he wants, except power. I will not abide another Rainer Leibniz running my empire. Her searing eyes choked the arguments hidden in the pocket of his heart. His lips quivered. I will not disappoint you.
All right. Thank you, Karen. And I'm giving applause for all of the authors tonight. Thank you so much for reading. All of the selections were really intriguing and lovely. So it's 8:17 now. We have about 10 to 15 minutes for a Q&A. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat now and I'll make sure it gets asked.
Thank you.
So take a second to be typing in there, I know. Oh, we have a question for Karen. So how did you get the idea / inspiration for Twisted Silver Spoons?
From among the various people I've encountered in my life, there are individuals who struggled with certain things, and the character George, in some ways, is modeled on one of the individuals I worked with to help become all he was meant to be. So that was the original inspiration, and this individual in becoming George in my mind, it just wouldn't leave me alone. So I've had tons of wonderful experiences in my life. So I suppose just based on a lot of those things, different ideas came to my mind that made this into something that wouldn't leave me alone until I wrote the book.
Sure. And then we have a question for all three authors, actually. So Cam says, I noticed in your bios that Elizabeth is a master gardener, Verena is a translator, and Karen an educator and founder of a school. I'm wondering how these lives and past lives bleed into your fiction or into your writing in general, if at all. And along those lines, how has your fiction allowed you to explore other life possibilities? So if one of you wants to take the floor on that.
Well, my life certainly has informed my work. There's no question about it. I don't think any writer can write without their lives informing that work in some way or another. I've been blessed to have wide range of experiences and travel widely, and to have made lasting friendships over long periods of time. So a lot of those things definitely inform that. In terms of how fiction has perhaps, I don't remember the exact wording of the question, but perhaps changed the trajectory of where it might take me. I think it introduces me to many, many more people, which I find so enriching.
Yeah, that's so lovely to hear. Maybe we could hear from Verena.
Okay, yeah. You know, I've worked as a translator, but also interpreter. Basically, I started out as a journalist. The writing was always more than the translating and the interpreting for me. But I worked actually the last, or I do not know how many years, mainly as a TV script writer after I wrote my first novel, because it was, I just liked it for a while. I just didn't want to keep on doing it when I came here. And of course, this book has a lot of things from my life going in there. Like I spent 15 or part of 15 years on Ibiza. So I really know this island and the old myths and histories and, you know, the clash or encounter with tourism, the locals had. So, I mean, things I did not read now, it has to do with specifically the Phoenician history of Ibiza. And I just was always fascinated with this. That's such a strange island full of tourists, but also with this totally old history. This still plays a role nowadays. So I always thought, and when I stopped writing for TV, and so I just said, I'm going to write it now. And as I was in Dallas, Texas, I said I'd do it in English.
Sounds good. And then Elizabeth, if you could give us some insight on your end as well.
Well, I've been a master gardener for a number of years, and I think one of the things that I learned early on with writing, I started as a poet and then later became a short story writer. Then I wrote some memoir, and so there's sort of all three genres kind of get all mixed up in my work. It's really kind of a hybrid. But as a gardener, what I learned as a writer is I really, really need to be very, very physical if I want to maintain my writing life. So gardening is really, really heavy work, but it's not just heavy work. There's all kinds of discrete decisions that need to be made, having to do with spatial arrangement, sequencing, patterning, all the things that are involved with writing. You know, I do some of my best work when I'm pulling weeds, you know, because I'm working sentences over and over and over in my head. And sometimes, I mean, I have a garden shed, and I've been known to keep a notebook in the garden shed. I work out in the garden. I take my computer out and work in the garden. So there, you know, of course, I can't do that in the middle of a blizzard, but which will be upon us before we know it. But that's, to me, it's all very intertwined. The physical, for me to you know, to be able to keep some mental acuity for the work, I need that physical outlet.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think a lot of people don't think of writing as like a physical practice, but yeah, that
It
totally
actually
makes
is a
sense.
very physical practice.
Right, yeah.
Or maybe it is for me because I have a stand-up desk, so I'm never
Oh,
seated
yeah.
when I'm working.
Oh, we have a question for Verena. Are any of the Texas parts influenced by us, your friends in Texas?
Hell yeah, Debbie. Of course, you know, you always put some things that you experience into your writing. You never, for instance, depict a person 100% or even 50%, but you always take parts you experience. And if you keep on reading this book, there is this one guy, Ezra, and I have a totally idiotic neighbor who sort of inspired him. So things always go in, and then the rest you invent and you put it together different ways, you know. But yeah, it has to do also with my Texas experience.
Alan would like to know where, i.e. what city did each of you write your books in? I think meaning where were you when you wrote those books?
Somebody answer. Or shall I? Well, I do
Yeah,
not.
this is for all three of you.
Well,
So.
I wrote it partly in Mainz and partly in Dallas because, you know, I live here and there, like 8 months here and 4 months there. So I, of course, take my laptop along and I sit on the Rhine River and write, or I sit in Dallas, Texas and write.
Quite a lot in New Jersey. Actually, most of it was written in New Jersey. The refinement process was here in Beaufort, South Carolina. And in New Jersey, let me think, because I lived in more than one place in New Jersey because my husband kept building houses. So I don't remember where I started it, but yeah. And for me personally, the refinement process took quite a long time because I wasn't satisfied and I wasn't satisfied. Of course, nobody else knows anything about that, right?
Kittery Point, Maine. Most of it, Blue Hill, Maine. I think when I was in Mexico this winter, I was on to another project. So, but you know, I tend to go to a residency, an artist residency, writer residency every winter, and I do that's when I get to travel. So
sounds good. And then Elizabeth would like to know for for all of the writers, or all three of you, how long did it take to bring out your books with Atmosphere Press? How was the editing and design process for you?
Not Karen, well, whoever.
Any of you want to?
Oh, I can start. That's fine.
Sure, yeah.
In terms of how long it took, it was a fairly short process of several months. I don't remember the number of months, but it wasn't that long. And I appreciated the fact that even when it was in its final form, it came back to me a couple times so I could check for mistakes and so forth. I appreciate the level of care that the team gave me during that process, and also for marketing, obviously, too.
Yeah. The same counts for me. I remember I was last winter, I was in Germany, and Nick from Atmosphere Press called me and we talked back and forth, and then the telephone connection broke down because it was, I do not know why. And so but he always called back, and then, you know, the editing, it was very meticulous. I really liked it. And, you know, it's not my native language, so I really needed it too. And yeah, for me, it was a very good experience. I never had worked, obviously, with an American publishing house, so I was pleasantly surprised.
So glad to hear that from both of you. And Elizabeth, you would like to chime in?
Oh, this was the one.
Nice. She has a pal with her.
this is my little this is Albert. Who was just barking his little brains out. Anyway, I found the whole experience with Atmosphere to be incredibly smooth incredibly fun, incredibly wonderful. I mean, I worked with Kyle on the editing process, and Cam knows that I absolutely love her to death. She's just a gem and just smart as a whip. So, I mean, the whole process I felt was very expedient. I feel like I have an exquisite book, and I'm really, really happy. And Albert was very happy too.
Great. Debbie would like to know, Elizabeth, is Arthur inspiring you in your writing?
What was that? Oh, Albert?
Oh, Albert, yes.
Albert is a rescue. I actually tried to write a book about Albert, but called See Albert. Well, anyway, that's another story. But Albert is a wonderful companion. I like to have something. I need the creature comfort of having. I live alone, so I need Albert. So.
Of course.
He keeps me happy.
Perfect. And then we have two last questions. So first, Verena, how do you decide if a story ends up as a script or a novel?
Well, you know, with this story, I actually knew it would be a novel because in a way you have more freedom when you write a novel than when you write a script. You know, when I was writing TV scripts, you know, every producer, director, whatever could tell you how to change things or say, oh, for this audience, this is too drastic or this is too blah, blah, you know. So you are much more in a cage in a way. And I had this idea for this book a long time ago when I found the Tanit cave on Ibiza, which will play a role there. And I knew I would write it, and I always knew I would write it as a novel.
Gotcha. And then one last question for all three of you. What kinds of things do you like to read when you're not writing or while you're writing?
I'm constantly reading. I have spiritually designed books, you know, that I read consistently, but I like to read about the writing process, and I like to read other novels, and I like to read history. I'm always reading several things at once. I love reading. I have a huge library.
Cool, no? Well, I like to, I read a lot of different things. I really like crime stories, but I do not like it's just so normal whodunit, you know. I like when the crime story is kind of the framework, and then a real story is told, you know. And there are all kinds of like, do you know Kate Moss, who always writes her novels, has this trilogy of novels that play in the Languedoc in the south of France. And I always like it when so history stories come in and different countries and lands come in, but I somehow prefer to read novels that are written in the nowadays and then go back in history. But because there are some exceptions, like for instance, Circe, this book which played, you know, in thousands of years ago, this made total sense for me. But in many history books, I always have the feeling you can feel that it's written from nowadays, you know. So I like to read history books but not novels. And I like to read novels from today where the history is put in, you know. So.
I'm constantly reading as well. I read tons of poetry, of course, because that's what I started as. But in the evening, I tend to read a lot of fiction. Mostly short stories and novels. I finished a collection of short stories last night. I think it's Karina and Sabrina or something like. It's terrible. I can't even remember the title of it. But last night I also started a new novel by Tim Winton called Dirt Music, which is set in Australia. That looks like a really, really interesting novel. So I cannot write if I'm not reading. I mean, that's just, they're hand in hand. It's like you can't you can't inhale and, the reading is the inhaling, the writing is the exhaling.
That's very nice. Good to say
Yeah.
it this way.
We're filling the well so that we can write.
It's
Exactly.
beautiful. Okay, well, this was so great. Thank you so much to Elizabeth, Verena, and Karen for your words and your brains and your generosity tonight. And thank you everyone for being here with us to celebrate these fabulous authors. Don't forget that you can order Because the Sky is 1,000 Soft Hurts, Island of Dead Gods, and Twisted Silver Spoons from the links in the chat. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, to sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. Feel free to submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We look forward to hearing from you. And that's it. Have a safe and wonderful weekend, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.